What kind of man spends his last 2 silver coins on a woman he has never spoken to? That was the question Cooper Mallister asked himself the moment the auctioneer slammed the gavel down and declared the trembling widow on stage his. The summer heat of 1885 pressed down on Sagebrush Creek, a hard Montana town baked by dust and disappointment. Cooper trudged into that place with nothing but a thin saddlebag, a dying horse, and the weight of everything he had ever lost. The land his father built, the dreams he once chased, even the will to hope. But the frontier had a way of cornering a man until he had nowhere left to go. He didn't come to Sagebrush Creek for trouble. He came searching for work, clutching the rumor that a rancher nearby might be hiring. With Grayson, his fading gray horse, limping at his side and an almost empty canteen bouncing against his shoulder, he followed the dusty road into town. Every step felt like he was marching deeper into a life he didn't recognize. The Broken Spur Saloon greeted him with heat, clattering glasses, and the low hum of men watching him with practiced suspicion. He looked like them, just another drifting soul worn thin by the West. He asked for water, could not spare even a dime for whiskey, and stared at a flyer offering ranch work like it was a promise he didn't dare believe. But then he saw her, a slender woman with a threadbare shawl peeking through the saloon window. Her eyes were haunted, deep pools of hurt and loneliness. When their gazes met, she slipped from sight as though afraid of being seen. Cooper felt something twist inside him, a tug, a warning, or maybe a calling. By dawn the next morning, he followed the crowds gathering behind the mercantile for what folks whispered was a special auction. He expected livestock, tools, maybe foreclosed land. Instead, he stepped inside a wide barn and froze. Women. Widows. Their hands folded, their eyes hollow. Their futures hanging on the clatter of coins and the mercy of men. The auctioneer called it an arrangement of survival. Cooper called it something else. Something that sank in his stomach like a stone. But he stood there anyway, gripping his last 2 coins, unsure whether to stay or run. One by one, the women stepped onto the stage, some older, some heartbreakingly young. Each looked like life had taken more from them than they could ever get back. Then she walked out, the same woman from the saloon window. Her name was Lillian Carter, chestnut hair in a loose braid. A faded blue dress washed pale by sun and hardship. Hands clasped together so tight her knuckles whitened with fear, the auctioneer's voice boomed, listing her debts and her desperate need for a protector. 50 cents, someone called. 75, another barked. Men whispered about her, some cruel, some pitying, a few curious, but Cooper saw only the fear in her eyes. It was the same fear he carried inside him since he'd lost everything. Bids crept to $1. Then one man stepped forward, Billy Rock. A gambler with a cruel smirk and a reputation for trouble. He raised the bid slightly, and Lillian's shoulders sagged as though fate had finally found her and she could not outrun it. Cooper felt something snap inside him. Not anger, not pride, something quieter but stronger. He lifted his hand, 2 silver coins. The barn went silent. Even the dust seemed to hang midair. "Sold!" the auctioneer barked. Lillian looked at him as though she didn't know whether to thank him or fear him. Cooper didn't know either. He had just spent everything he had on a stranger, a woman with a sorrowful past, a woman who now legally belonged to him. And the moment they stepped outside into the blazing afternoon sun, people stared. Some murmured sympathy, others judgment. One look from Billy Rock promised trouble wasn't far. "You can go to the courthouse," the auctioneer said, handing Cooper a slip. "Judge can make it a contract or a marriage. Depends on what you want." Cooper blinked. Marriage? He hadn't even thought that far. Lillian tightened her shawl around her shoulders, trembling. "I don't know how this works," she whispered, "but if you wish to walk away, I won't blame you." Cooper removed his hat and swallowed hard. "I ain't walking away," he said. "Not after what I saw in there." Her eyes welled with tears she tried to hide. They went to the courthouse, signed where they were told, spoke vows under a flickering lamp with an old judge as witness. When they stepped back into the sunset, They were strangers no longer. They were husband and wife. The small room above the general store became their first home. One bed, one chair, thin walls, no comfort except the quiet relief of surviving the day. That night, Cooper gave Lillian the bed and slept in the chair. He listened to the muffled noises of the town and wondered if he'd made the biggest mistake of his life. Or the best. Lillian sat awake long after the lantern burned out. Her past clung to her like a shadow she could not shake, whispers claiming she poisoned her late husband. Debts she could never repay. A dangerous man who believed she was hiding something. Cooper didn't know it yet, but marrying her meant stepping into a storm he was not prepared for. And the first rumble of that storm came at lunch the next day, when Billy Rock kicked open the diner door and strode toward them with murder in his eyes. Why did danger always find a man the moment he tried to build a quiet life? That was the thought pounding inside Cooper Mallister's head as Billy Rock slammed open the diner door, boots thudding hard against the wooden floor. The noise silenced every spoon and froze every breath. The smell of frying bacon hung in the air, as if even the smoke was afraid to move. Rock swaggered toward them with two rough-looking men behind him. His smirk was cold, and his eyes burned like coal. "Well, well," he drawled loud enough for the entire diner to hear. "If it ain't the lucky cowboy who thinks he can buy himself a killer wife." Lillian flinched. Cooper stood, jaw tight. "I don't want trouble," he said firmly. Rock leaned closer, the stink of whiskey heavy on his breath. "Trouble already found you." His eyes cut to Lillian, mean, hungry, cruel. "You poisoned one husband," Rock hissed. "Why not another?" Suddenly he grabbed her wrist. Lillian gasped. Cooper moved so fast his chair fell backward. He snatched Rock's wrist and yanked it free from Lillian with a strength born of pure fury. "Let go of my wife!" Rock's cronies stiffened. Hands drifted toward gun belts. The tension in the diner twisted tight like a rope about to snap. Rock sneered. "That's so? What you gonna do, cowboy?" Cooper didn't answer. His hand hovered over his revolver. Then everything exploded at once. Rock drew. Cooper drew. Chairs scraped. Someone screamed. Before a single shot fired, a voice boomed through the room. "That's enough!" A tall man filled the doorway, badge glinting on his chest. U.S. Marshal Samuel Evers. A man whose stare could freeze a river solid. "Holster your guns," the marshal commanded. Rock hesitated, but only for a breath, before sliding his revolver back into place. Evers' gaze swept over the room, over Lillian's trembling hand, over Rock's twisted smirk, over Cooper's steady stance. "You want to fight," the marshal growled at Rock. "I'll give you one you won't walk away from, but you leave this couple alone." Rock clicked his tongue. "This ain't over." He stormed out with his men, leaving the diner thick with fear and whispers. Lillian sank back into her seat, breath shaking. Cooper sat beside her, his hand hovering near hers, but not daring to touch until she looked up. "Are you all right?" he asked softly. She nodded, though her eyes betrayed the truth. She was terrified. Marshal Evers lingered at their table. "He's dangerous," he said. "More than you know. Be careful." Then he tipped his hat and stepped outside, the door closing behind him with a heavy thud. That night, Cooper and Lillian packed their few belongings and walked to the Hastings Ranch, hoping work would bring safety. Morning light spilled across green pastures as they arrived. Charles Hastings, a stern man with calloused hands and steel in his gaze, greeted them. "You're the Mallisters," he said simply. "My foreman says you work hard. That's good. I need hard workers." Quote. They started that same day. Cooper shoveled stalls, hauled water, and handled horses with the ease of a man who belonged to the saddle. Lillian cooked beside Mary, the ranch cook, and kept the bunkhouse tidy. The ranchmen warmed to her slowly. Some whispered behind her back, but Mary defended her, and that mattered most. For a few days, things felt almost peaceful. At supper one evening, Lillian sat beside Cooper, her cheeks flushed from the heat of the kitchen. For the first time, she didn't look scared. She looked hopeful. After the meal, they slipped away from the noise of the bunkhouse and walked to the edge of a small creek beneath cottonwood trees. The sky glowed orange and pink. In the fading light, Lillian whispered, "Cooper, do you ever think this could become a real marriage?" The question stunned him. He stared at the rippling water, afraid to speak too quickly. "I don't know what the future holds," he said honestly, "but I'm glad you're here with me." Her eyes softened. She reached for his hand, their fingers intertwined. It felt natural, gentle, right. For the first time since they married, they smiled. Not out of relief, but out of something new, something close to affection. But the peace shattered a moment later. A rider raced toward them, dust billowing behind his horse. Will Hastings, Charles's son, reined in hard. "You need to get back," he gasped. "Rock's out on bail." "Then he's coming for you," said he'll settle the score before sunrise. Lillian's breath hitched. Cooper felt something cold settle in his stomach. He stood, gripping her hand tightly. "We're ready." They weren't, but they had no choice. They rushed back to the ranch as the last light faded. Hastings armed his men. Gus, the foreman, posted lookouts. The ranch house glowed with lanterns. Shadows stretched long across the yard, the night thick with dread. Shortly before dawn, the sound of hooves thundered across the dirt. Rock rode in with 3 men, all armed. "Come out, Mallister!" Rock roared. "Let's end this!" Hastings stepped onto the porch with a shotgun. "You're trespassing!" Rock ignored him. He wanted blood. Cooper stepped from behind the barn, rifle in hand. Lillian stepped with him, fear shining in her eyes, but courage holding her up. "It ends tonight," Cooper said. Rock sneered. "Where's your poison bride? She's got something that belongs to me." Lillian's voice rang out strong. "You drove Samuel into debt and sickness. You killed him long before the fever took him." "Liar!" Rock screamed, raising his gun. A gunshot cracked the air. Chaos erupted. Cooper fired, striking one of Rock's men. Another returned fire, bullets whizzing past fences and barn beams. Lillian squeezed the trigger of her revolver, hitting a rider's saddle and sending him tumbling to the dirt. Rock aimed for her. Cooper dove, firing fast, grazing Rock's arm. Just as Rock lifted his gun again, another shot rang out. Sharper, louder. Marshal Samuel Evers stormed into the yard with a posse. "Drop your weapons!" he bellowed. Rock spun to shoot the marshal, but Evers fired first. Rock's gun flew from his hand. His men surrendered, fear finally breaking through their bravado. The fight was over. Cooper rushed to Lillian, breath heavy. "You hurt?" he asked. She shook her head, tears slipping down her cheeks. "I'm all right." "Are you?" "Now I am." The marshal shackled Rock, hauling him toward town. Charles Hastings approached, gripping Cooper's shoulder. "You two defended this ranch," he said. "You've earned your place here. If you want work and a home, you'll have it." Cooper looked at Lillian. For the first time, she wasn't trembling. She was smiling through tears. The sun rose over the ranch, bathing them in warm golden light. The world felt fresh, quiet, hopeful. "It's over," Cooper whispered, holding her close. Lillian leaned into him. "No, it's just beginning." How does a man rebuild a life he thought was already over? That was the question Cooper Mallister carried in his chest as the first morning after the gunfight broke over Sagebrush Creek. The sun rose slow and soft, casting gold light across the Hastings ranch, touching every fence post, every pine tree, every trembling breath he and Lillian took as they watched the day begin. Billy Rock was gone, hauled away in irons by Marshal Evers. The danger had passed. For the first time since the auction, silence didn't feel like a warning. It felt like peace. Cooper stood in the yard, hands resting on the top rail of the corral fence. The sunrise warmed his face, easing aches he didn't realize he had. Behind him, he felt the gentle presence of Lillian before he even heard her step. She wrapped her shawl tight against the morning chill and stood beside him. "Couldn't sleep?" she asked quietly. "Too much on my mind," he answered. She nodded. "Me too." The horses grazed lazily in the early light. Grayson, Cooper's old gray gelding, nudged the grass, looking stronger than he had since they arrived. Lillian smiled at him warmly. "He looks better," she said. "So do you." Cooper chuckled softly. "I guess I do." For a moment, the world felt still, but the peace carried something else, something new and unfamiliar. Not fear, not dread, possibility. Lillian leaned lightly against the fence, her fingers brushing his. Not by accident, not to steady herself, but because she wanted to. "Cooper," she said softly, "I need to ask you something." He turned to her, noticing the calm in her eyes. Not the haunted look from days before, something steadier, braver. "Do you regret it?" she whispered. "Buying that bid? Standing by me? Marrying me, even though we didn't know each other?" Quote, her voice wavered at the end, but her gaze held strong. Cooper swallowed, the weight of her words hitting him deep. "No," he said, "I don't regret any of it." Her breath caught. "Truth is," he continued, "I think losing everything brought me right where I needed to be. Maybe that's the Lord's way of setting things right. Maybe it was all for this." Lillian's eyes softened, filling with tears she didn't hide this time. "Cooper," she whispered, "you saved my life. And you saved mine." He didn't even realize he'd said it until her fingers slid gently into his, holding tight. Before either of them could speak again, Charles Hastings strode across the yard, a paper in hand. "Mallister," he called, "I need a word with you." Quote. Cooper squeezed Lillian's hand once before stepping toward the ranch owner. Hastings handed him an envelope, thin, worn, bearing a faded stamp. "Came from the post office this morning," Hastings said. "Has your name on it." Cooper frowned. He hadn't received a letter in years, not since his parents' deaths and the loss of the family ranch. He opened it carefully. The letter inside was from the bank. His breath hitched as he read it once, then again. "Well," Hastings asked, "bad news?" Cooper stared at the paper, stunned. No, it's not bad." The letter stated that the Mallister Ranch, the land he'd lost, had recently come under review. With the old banker dead and the fraudulent foreclosure discovered, the property was now available to reclaim for a small settlement fee. A fee he could pay if he kept working and saved for a year or two. His voice trembled. "I can get my family land back." Hastings smiled beneath his bristly mustache. "Looks like fate's giving you a second chance." Cooper turned, heart racing, and met Lillian's gaze across the yard. Her lips parted in surprise as she read the joy in his face. "You can go back," she whispered when he reached her. "You can rebuild what you lost." But Cooper shook his head gently. "No, we can." She blinked. "Me? You think I'm leaving you behind?" he asked. "Lillian, I didn't rescue you to walk away now. I want a future with you. Not because of the auction, not because of a piece of paper. Because somewhere along the way, I stopped feeling alone." Her eyes shimmered. One tear slipped, but her smile grew bright. "I stopped feeling alone too," she said. He lifted her hands in his, rough palms wrapping around her delicate fingers. "This marriage started as survival," he said, "but I want more. I want you as my wife in truth." She took a shaky breath. "And I want you." A warm breeze rustled the grass around them. The world seemed to hold its breath. Cooper stepped closer. She didn't look away. She didn't tremble. Instead, she leaned in as his forehead touched hers. Their breaths mingled, soft and certain. The kiss they shared was slow, tender, and full of everything they hadn't said. A promise made beneath the rising sun. When they finally pulled apart, Lillian laughed quietly, joy bubbling up like water from a long, dry well. "So," she whispered, "when do we leave for your ranch?" Cooper grinned. "As soon as we're ready, we'll rebuild it together." They worked the Hastings Ranch for months, saving every cent, learning each other's rhythms, growing into a partnership built on trust, grit, and blooming affection. Lillian became known not as the Black Widow, but as the bravest woman on the range. Cooper earned the respect of every ranch hand. A year later, they rode out to the Mallister land, side by side. The house was worn, the fences broken, but to them it looked like hope. Together, they rebuilt it, hammer by hammer, board by board. Across the wide Montana plains, word spread of a couple who once met in a dusty auction barn and forged a life stronger than hardship, rumor, or fear. And every morning, as dawn rose over their new home, Cooper Mallister kissed the woman he'd once bought with 2 silver coins. Now the wife he cherished with his whole heart.